FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Today's show is brought to you by Blue Sky Uranium Corporation. Blue Sky has first mover advantage in Argentina in the world's newest uranium and vanadium district. With an existing near-surface deposit that's open for expansion, Blue Sky also controls a massive district-scale land package with mineralization along a 145-kilometer-long trend. Blue Sky possesses tremendous exploration upside and is an excellent leverage play on rising uranium and vanadium prices. The company is run by a best-in-class management and technical team with proven exploration and development success in Argentina. Blue Sky Uranium trades under the ticker symbol BSK on the Toronto Venture Exchange and as BKUCF on the OTC. For more information and to stay on top of the latest news, go to blueskyuranium.com. That's blueskyuranium.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 5/28/19. Hope you all had a great Memorial Day weekend. I did myself. It was memorable, and I am stoked, loaded for bear. In addition, I want you to know that I donated $1 to the Comrade de Blasio campaign for president, and for a very simple reason. I get special insider updates from the campaign that you normal people don't get. And what's really good, the way it works for me, is that this is comedy writing that I would have to pay somebody thousands of dollars to get this caliber of comedy, and I get it all for $1. So I will keep you up to date on the exploits of Comrade de Blasio. A lot more going on here. Last week, holiday week, huge news week. This is the age of Trump. There are the old weeks where it used to be a slow news day, as they say in the newsroom. They don't exist anymore. Holidays, the press just packed up and went away to go on their 3-day binge, and they would just forget about news. Nothing happened in the world. Not so anymore. Well, as always, John Rubino is with us, dollarcollapse.com. Hey, any questions for either one of us, email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. So, John, pretty amazing, huh?
Hey, Kerry. Well, every week is eventful these days, but the last week has been way more than usual. A lot of stuff happened, most of it pretty ominous. I'll go through a really brief list, leaving off a lot of stuff, but I'll hit the high points here. U.S. stocks fell for the 5th straight week, which is the longest losing streak they've had since 2011. And that was pretty much unremarked in the press.
No, I got missed.
Yeah. Well, I think because everybody's still in buy the dip mode. So for the stocks to go down a little bit is no big deal because they always assume it's coming back. They always assume the Fed is going to bail them out. And that's probably true again. Who knows? But other stuff, the U.S. yield curve inverted decisively. It's been kind of flirting with inversion for quite a while, but last week it inverted dramatically because long-term rates plunged, probably in response to turmoil overseas and a slowing economy. In Europe, they had elections for the European Union Parliament, which isn't national elections. It's who, Great Britain or France sends to the EU Parliament to represent them there. And both the far right and far left kicked butt.
Yes.
In other words, the populist parties did great, and the mainstream parties got crushed. In France, Marine Le Pen beat Emmanuel Macron, the president.
Crushed him.
Yeah, crushed him. And in Great Britain, the Brexit Party, which didn't exist a few months ago.
45 days ago. It's 45 days old, that party, John. This is remarkable.
The Tories and the Labor parties to get the most votes for the European Union Parliament. And meanwhile, Austria's government collapsed. That was a separate thing. That was a bribery scandal.
Yeah, that was a scandal. Yeah.
The European government collapsed while all this was going on. And the Italian bond market, which is somewhat related to this because the Italian government was emboldened by having their populists do well in the European Union elections. But the EU is now threatening to sanction Italy for running excessive deficits. So Italian bonds are tanking and Italian bond yields are spiking. And the Italian government is now calling on the European Union to guarantee all Eurozone government debt.
And what choice do they have?
Because that's basically a ticket for Italy to borrow as much as it wants to at incredibly low interest rates, because everybody assumes that it's really German debt. When you lend money to Italy, you're really lending money to Germany, since Germany's the backstop.
Correct.
In the European Union, right? They have to bail everybody out. And that's disturbing. If you would like the European Union to continue to exist and not go bankrupt at an accelerating rate, you really don't want Italy and Greece and Spain and even France to be able to borrow with impunity. You want them to have to prioritize like any healthy
fiscal responsibility, right?
Yeah. And then now, while all this was going on, Bitcoin got almost back up to 9,000 after falling to around 3,000 within the past year. So it is tripled. And Bitcoin is sort of, lately it's been taking on the role that gold historically has taken on, which is a safe haven asset that people jump into immediately when they're worried. So gold is up in a lot of foreign currencies, and it's at record levels in a lot of foreign currencies. But in the US, it's just sitting there.
Correct.
But Bitcoin is the really volatile safe haven asset now. It plunges when we're confident and spikes when we're nervous. And the fact that it's spiking again is a sign of nervousness on the part of people who are, technically savvy enough to trade Bitcoin. So final thing, floods just decimated the U.S. agricultural sector.
Correct.
Out in the Midwest, we had these monster storms and rivers have overflown, and so we're looking at hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, of damage to crops that should be in the ground and growing nicely right now, but they either weren't even planted because of the floods.
Couldn't get to the fields.
Yeah, you can't get to the fields, or they were planted and they're not growing the way they should because the weather is so erratic.
Correct.
So add all that up, and you had a nice, borderline chaotic week in the U.S. and global financial systems.
And there's one other thing I'd add to that, John, is in the People's Republic of China, their favorite food is pork, which comes from pigs. And they've had a really nasty outbreak of African swine flu. And as a result, they've had to slaughter a third of the herd. And there's only one country in the world that seems to have a surplus of pork. Guess what country that is? The U.S. Yeah. So much for their countervailing tariffs. It's not going to do any good. But more importantly, when you combine the fact that all of these feed grains like soybeans and corn, which are used to feed cattle and pork, and sorghum too. Ned Schmidt knows what sorghum is. I have no idea what the stuff is. I've never seen sorghum on sale at Whole Foods or at Publix, so I don't know what the heck the stuff is. But evidently, farm animals eat the stuff to get bigger. So all of these crops have taken it on the chin. They're down by 80 and 90%, but just say 2/3. So there is a large inventory because they've been overproducing for 20 years. There are huge silos and government stockpiles of cheese and everything else, but that is not going to stop the prices from skyrocketing. I haven't seen it in the supermarket yet, though, John. I buy a Boar's Head Deluxe ham, and it's $11.29 a pound at Publix, except when they have a sale and they bring it down to 10. And I have not seen that ham move by a cent yet, but I'll know when it hits, when I see the ham go up to like $12, $13, $15 a pound, and it's going to happen.
Well, there's an even deeper level to this story, which is that monoculture industrial agriculture is inherently fragile. And
Correct.
in China, they pack pigs into these tiny little spaces, and they have these huge buildings where these poor pigs just live and die.
It's inhumane.
Incredibly inhumane, but and also incredibly dangerous from the point of view of epidemics, right?
Yes.
When one pig gets sick, all the rest of the pigs are in danger, and that's what's happening in China right now. They're hog farming techniques, and it's the same thing in the U.S. It's the opposite of sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're so susceptible to all kinds of problems, and they have to pump them full of antibiotics to keep stuff like this from happening,
and the hormones too.
Yeah, and so it's a terrible system, no matter how you look at it. And we're seeing one consequence of that kind of a dysfunctional system now with this epidemic that's forcing them to kill all these pigs. Mm-hmm. And roiling the agriculture markets. But, the same thing is true for almost all of these gigantic crops where you drive through farm country and you see a field that goes on as far as the eye can see to the horizon, and it's all one plant, one kind of plant.
Yeah, I know.
Well, obviously those things are susceptible to some new kind of fungus or new virus or whatever it is that comes along because there's no genetic diversity, and they're using massive amounts of pesticides and herbicides to try to keep this thing going. So, it's a system that's not going to be able to work much longer, and you're going to see things like what's happening with the China hog market become more common as time goes on. So we're seeing the end of a dysfunctional system. And it's not completely clear what replaces it, because the system itself is going to collapse. Well, you probably saw the stuff with those veggie burgers that came out lately, right? Like Impossible Burger.
Yeah, I heard something about it.
The companies that make them, or one of the companies that make them, had a really hot IPO. It was one of the best performing IPOs ever. And that implies that that's a hot sector now, because Silicon Valley venture capital and direct equity capital now think that the time has come for meat to be replaced in a lot of different uses with meat replacements, veggie patties that are actually as good as Whoppers or lab-grown meat.
They're not going to be as good.
That's going to be an interesting transition.
Not going to be as good as a Whopper. But what Ned Schmidt said, and I consider him to be one of the foremost experts on ag and ag commodities. What he said is that in 10 years, your kids will they will not be able to get a T-bone steak. The things will be like gold, and it'll be a thing of the past. They'll talk about it like, remember when we had T-bone steaks, Daddy? And kind of crazy. But hey, we got a question from Thomas, who's a FSN community member, and of course I just misplaced it. There it is. So I think we should answer it. Why is silver not a tier 1 asset, and will it ever be? Been trying to get an answer to this question regarding the Basel III rules. If central banks are not allowed to regard silver as the kind of cash asset that gold is, why accumulate silver if gold is easier to buy and sell, and price is supported by their buying? JP Morgan has a lot of silver, but not all of it is theirs. And also, they are not a central bank. Well, they're pretty close to one. They own shares, probably the largest share of the Federal Reserve. So silver has no official status anywhere. Also, I heard there was a legislative bill in Mexico to regard silver as money. That's Hugo Salinas Price. It's been going on for years, nothing happening. But that bill died. Silver seems only to be industrial, medical, like any other metal commodity. Thanks for any info. So you got thoughts on that, Sean?
Yeah, silver has a history as a monetary metal, which makes it a traditional form of savings. In other words, you can probably count on silver to trade along with gold, because if gold gets too high, people switch to silver because it still carries that monetary metal tradition. It's also an industrial metal, which makes it a little trickier for a country to use as money, because you never know if something's going to happen in some big industrial supply chain to change the industrial demand for silver. It might spike, it might tank when something new comes along, and that makes it more volatile. But it still does trade along with gold because here's the dynamic. When gold gets expensive, let's say gold goes to $1,500, $2,000 an ounce, that's a lot of money for one little coin. And then you look at silver and you think, wow, silver is at $25 an ounce. I can buy a ton of silver for what I would have had to pay to buy this gold coin. And so you switch. And that's what keeps the gold-silver ratio within a trading range. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's at the far end of its trading range. In other words, gold is as expensive relative to silver as it's ever been. And silver is as cheap relative to gold as it's ever been. So historically, and again, I don't think we want to expect 3,000 years of history to end in this cycle. In other words, silver to just be completely dropped as a monetary metal this time. Yeah. Maybe it happens someday in the distant future, but it's highly unlikely that this is the year in which it happens. And, so if we assume that silver and gold still have a relationship, and now gold is 88 times as expensive as silver, what has happened pretty much every time we've been in a situation like this is that you get a precious metals bull market in which silver outperforms gold. So if we're going to use history as any kind of a guide, the market seems to be saying it's time to start buying silver and or buy silver and short gold to play the spread, but definitely accumulate silver.
I would add one more thing to that, and that is that because it's an industrial metal, there is no way that the central bank of central banks, the Basel, Bank for International Settlements, is going to afford it any further status as a monetary metal and thereby potentially drive up the price of the commodity. That's not what they're about. Gold is really, besides jewelry and a couple of electronics uses, doesn't have any uses. But silver has a plethora of uses, from everything from medical bandages to electronics. It's in every iPhone and in every car and everything else. So they don't want to put the thumb down on the scale and wind up having a run on silver or starting something that they can't stop. So
yeah, two more thoughts with that, Kerry. One is that the whole industrial metal thing is actually a positive for silver because there really isn't that much silver in the world. The major silver mines are producing less and less each year. And the industrial uses for silver are spreading. So if you eliminate the whole monetary aspect from silver, it's probably still an attractive investment just because the supply-demand situation is so interesting. Every solar panel that's made right now contains a little bit of silver. Mm-hmm. Every iPhone, every computer, every microchip anywhere has a little bit of silver.
All electronics. You can pretty much say universal. So it could have silver solder in it, but it's silver.
Yeah, and you don't recycle that silver in a lot of cases because there's so little of it that it's not worth the work to get the silver out of there. So that silver just disappears.
Yeah.
So you could look at silver the way you look at copper and think, okay, it's got a bright future in technology as technology spreads around the world, and just, buy it as that kind of an investment. But the fact that it is also a monetary metal in a lot of people's minds adds another level to the demand for it and another level to the volatility, because investment demand is very cyclical and very volatile. And when people get nervous, they pile into something like silver. And that's such a thin market that, 0.5% of investable funds in the world moved into silver. It would send it to the moon. Yeah. So it just looks like a really attractive situation, no matter how you slice it.
Yeah.
And the other thing about gold not having any other uses, a lot of people look at that as a drawback. They think of gold as this atavistic rock. It doesn't have any use. Why do we call it money? And the fact is, money shouldn't have any other uses. If money is also some kind of an industrial commodity or something like that, its value fluctuates with industrial demand. And you don't want that. You want it to be just stable based on its supply.
Exactly.
And gold is pretty much all the gold that's ever been mined still exists in the form of jewelry or gold bars in vaults.
Yeah. Exactly.
And its supply increases by about 2% a year. So if you tie your money to something with those characteristics, it forces you to limit your money supply growth to the growth in the supply of gold, which is about 2% a year, which is not far from population growth. So you get stable money. Mm-hmm. And that's what gold offers and did offer to the world for 200 years, the classical gold standard. We had zero inflation, we had steady growth, and we had a monetary system that nobody had to worry about. And contrast that with fiat currencies today, where it's absolute chaos. The idea that we know the name of our central bankers tells you right there what a crazy system this is. You should never know who your central bankers are. That should be just the most boring job in the world.
It should be a guy with eye shade and very pale skin, because he's always inside with numbers. And one other thing on silver was 20, 30 years ago, there was 10 times more silver above the ground than gold. And now, the last I heard, and this was years and years ago, there was 10 times more gold above the ground than silver, because the silver has been consumed. Now, the high uses of silver are gone. That was photographic and medical. Every X-ray had like a few grams of silver. But just think of how much silver went down the drain when they were developing those negatives and developing the photos. Those are gone, but there's been a lot of uses that have come along in the interim, as well as electronics and computers and everything else that have more than made up the slack. And it's hard to get a grasp on demand and supply, because there's a lot of supply that comes to the market that isn't ever acknowledged. So on that note, I guess we got to go, John. So check out John's site. It's dollarcollapse.com. Check out ours, Financial Survival Network. Sign up for both of our newsletters. John, we will catch up with you next week.
See you, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.